Welcome back to the Rock and Blues Experience. And coming up today, we're going to be talking to Derek Shulman, one of the founder members of prog rock legends Gentle Giant, on the eve of the release of one of the great live albums, not just of the 1970s, but of any era. Playing the Fool, the complete live experience, is a full reworking, remastering of the original with new tracks, a new running order, all of the intersong banter between the band and the crowd. And it's also been recorded in multiple formats, so you can hear it in stereo, 5.1 and Dolby Atmos. Now, we're going to be looking back at his beginnings in the music industry, his time with Simon Dupree in the 60s before teaming up with Jerry Braun as they set off on their career as Gentle Giant. Firstly, though, if you're yet to catch last week's show, Deborah Bonham joined us and we looked back at what's been a highly eventful life in the music industry. Here's a clip from that show with Deborah remembering the very sound advice that was offered to her as she set off on this musical odyssey by Robert Plant.
You mentioned Robert's advice, and his presence has been a constant over the years, right from the beginning. That night that you pick up the phone, you think, right, I've got to have a go at this. Ring him up and say, look, I've got to see if I can sing. I want to see if I can do it. And so you're off to Palomino Studios. But what was great was he didn't dismiss you straight away and just said, no, you just go off and do something else.
No, not at all. He did say, and I think this was a very important thing for me and has been throughout my career, he did say, what are you going to do about the name? Because you're going to get everyone come after you. And of course I was young and looked good then, and all of that. And he said, you're going to have all these people come after you and it's going to be Zeppelin related. And he said, but what are you going to do about the name? Oh
my God. Do you remember Dread Zeppelin?
Yeah, I do remember Dread Zeppelin.
Best advice he gave you was get out there and earn your dues in a live environment. You were 19 and you still have the letter that he wrote you with that advice on it. On the Wolverhampton Wanderers stationery.
That's amazing. Yes, I do.
You've still got it.
He gave me £100 to go and for the. Oh no, not £100. He wouldn't have given me that. No, he did. He gave me £100 to go and get myself together and get up to the General Wolf. It was called in Coventry.
Yeah.
And he said, go and get yourself a gig at the General Wolf. Here you are. Here's a bit of expenses to get yourself together and go and do it. So yeah, I've still got that. And
that's brilliant.
And and then of course since we've played together, which has been brilliant. He decked for me, bless his heart. The audience could not believe it. We played Blackpool Blues Festival last year or something like that. And I had the worst flu and laryngitis. I mean, I was really hanging. I was so bad. And so anyway, I thought I've got to try and get through this. Robert called me up and he said, I'm going to come up and see you. I said, no, I'm going to be dreadful. He said, no, I'll come up. So I said, do you fancy getting up? He said, yeah, I'll get up and do one. Of course, I did about 2 songs. I couldn't sing anymore. And I went, no, my special guest, Robert Plant, and the audience. They didn't know that this was going to happen. Went absolutely mental. By this stage, he'd got it. And he's going, I'm only doing one. About 7 songs later, he's still up there. Oh, it was brilliant, yeah.
The Damn Truth have been busy fielding all the plaudits coming their way, and there have been a great many following the release of the self-titled new album a couple of weeks ago. Now, recently, Leela Baum, Dave Traynor, and P.Y. Letellier joined me on the show, and here's a clip with the band talking about day one in the studio with the legendary award-winning producer, Bob Rock at the helm.
So I think that, when we got to the studio and on day one, Bob was like saying, okay, I've got a bunch of vocalists. I want to come in for this. I've got a keyboard guy. I've got this. I've got that. I was like, our minds were blowing up. Like, it was like, really, this is all going to happen with our little record. And it was amazing. It does so much, and it adds so many layers
Yeah,
to
new
have
layers that
backup.
we've never had before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it's yeah, truthfully, like when I can't listen back to that or Dying Dove without crying. I just can't. Like I tear up because it makes me so. I don't know. The power is overwhelming for me.
I
The
was
way
going to
those two
say,
songs came about.
the moment that it starts swinging, the moment those harmonies kick in, and you get the background vocals, and you get that choral feel, and again, it's one of those foreigner moments, isn't it? I want to know what love is. You can almost feel the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and you're going to get these big beer drinking guys at gigs wiping away tears.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, man. The best.
Where is this old town then? Where can it still be found? What's what journey were you on looking for this? Is it somewhere from your childhood?
I'm gonna leave that one for me and Tom, and it's like some things are too personal to really open up on.
Yeah.
If you don't
But
mind.
you've put that out there though
For sure. For
the
sure, but I
minds of
want to. But I
people.
want to keep. I want to. It's like it's really important that everyone finds their own place.
Yeah, sure.
In the lyrics.
So after you've come off at the back of that, and again the album turns another corner because Better This Way has got this sort of country flavor to it.
It's crazy. How did that happen?
Sort of 80s vibe and this sort of sing-along chorus, and okay, that's the story of the first boyfriend, or is it the first girlfriend?
Right. Exactly.
Is it the boyfriend or the girlfriend?
Exactly. I'm not telling. Exactly, though. Yes, it is that first love, that primal.
What did you think about it?
It's pretty self-explanatory. Those lyrics are straight in your face. I don't have to talk too much about that waterbed, right?
I was just about to say the old waterbed sound in front. But how did you feel? How did you feel about the sound of the trail offers? Because again, it's completely different to anything else that is on there. With that, I mean, it was almost like the Eagles.
Or like I hear Bryan Adams when I hear it. It's like it's very very different, and it's very strange the way that song came about. Like if I like a lot of the songs, it starts on acoustic guitar. So at first, like you have that. The acoustic vibe and the acoustic feel, and then when we bring it to the studio, it's like, well, it could go any which way, and it could happen in any direction. But I don't know. There was just something very, very. I don't know how you would put it. Just simple, like a simple song in when I hear it, like that. Just already everything was there, like, and it just needed to be, recorded properly, enhanced the right mood, and I find that that nothing interferes with it. It's like sure, this is like a straight up, easy listening pop rock song, and it's like it's not like who we are or what we are. It doesn't matter, but it works. It's a beautiful song. We played it live now on our cruise for the first couple times, like as an encore, and it went over fabulously. Like this is like even the fans that we have never heard this song before. They're not. It's a brand new song, and there's just something about it that I don't know, that just grabs you.
Great band, fabulous album, great people as well. And you can see the full version of that feature on the YouTube channel, the Facebook pages, and indeed on the website, www.therockandbluesexperience.com or theclassicrockpodcast.com. Moving on, Derek Shulman has enjoyed extraordinary success both as an artist and a record company head. His eye for talent is almost the stuff of legend. He signed Bon Jovi, he signed Cinderella, he signed Kingdom Come, Pantera, Nickelback, Dream Theater, to name just a few. And he was responsible as well for reviving the career of the mighty AC/DC, who'd been flagging, of course, in the mid-1980s. They were on the verge as well at that time of being dropped by their then record company, Atlantic Records. Now, under his guidance, they headed to Vancouver. Bruce Fairbairn, Bob Rock were in tow as well, and they emerged with the album that re-established AC/DC as one of the leading bands of the time. The Razor's Edge was the album. Thunderstruck was one of the singles, which has gone on to become one of their most played tracks. So we've got a lot to talk about here, but we began right at the very start with the influence of his jazz-loving father as the brothers were growing up in Portsmouth.
The life journey that you've gone on, now, it must have been fantastic to grow up in a house full of music. Your father, the jazz band leader who loved Charlie Parker and Stan Getz. You're falling over musical instruments as you're walking around the house, and you hear him coming in late and sitting up through the night. So both of your parents highly encouraging of getting you involved in music. But what a great place to grow up.
Yeah, I was very lucky. We were very lucky, me and my siblings, that the music was an art and everything sort of cultural, if you like, was part of our lives growing up, and we didn't know that other people didn't have that. It was a kind of a bizarre experience, just having my father being a professional musician. And a lifestyle that goes with that back in those days, which is not exactly a one which is stable, but nevertheless, it was wonderful to have, I guess, that experience for all of us, literally, and obviously that the genetic makeup of my dad and my mother, trickled down to me and my siblings. So I was very lucky.
You loved American blues artists. Of course, you listened a lot to the
Sure.
Radio Luxembourg, and living where you did as well down on Portsmouth. I can imagine you with the little transistor radio tuning into all those American Forces radio stations that played all of that, because you rarely got any of it over in this country.
Well, exactly right. That's what. Not many. Well, some kids did. I went to grammar school, which you probably know about. I was lucky enough to get past my 11 plus and wear my uniform. But my couple of good friends, who were into American blues and soul music, would come home from school and tune into American Forces Network and Radio Luxembourg, as you said, and we just loved that, loved hearing black blues and black American music and soul music, and when we were able to pick up an instrument, we'd listen and try to play that kind of music rather than what was on the radio at that point in those days. So, it was a huge influence, not just on me, but on everyone during that era, not least of which is the Beatles, of course.
No surprise that you got a band up and running pretty soon, Howling Wolves, etc. And then, of course, Simon Dupree doing loads of local clubs. You've got a big following. But your brother-in-law was a BBC producer who got you to do this demo up in Bristol in front of the EMI execs before you went to Abbey Road. So do you remember that?
Well, yeah, of course I remember we did a demo in Bristol, but it wasn't it wasn't in front of the execs. We just did about 4 or 5 songs, and his name was John King, and he was incredibly enterprising, actually. Someone, because he was my brother-in-law, we didn't realize in those days why and how important that was. And he was able to take the demos over to the BBC, and through his connections, was able to get us the demos to EMI at Abbey Road. And in fact, so we were asked to come up to Abbey Road the group. This is Simon Dupree. This is, and do a live show. I mean, effectively, and usually, what on the other side of the business, when I did, a show or something, you do 3 or 4 songs. No, they wanted to do, and this is literally the whole of Abbey Road staff, including George Martin, including all of the other people. There's about 25, people sitting there with their arms folded, and we were on the stage, and we did the full set. I mean, we had to do our literally like hour and a half, 2 hour set, and we were going at it like it was 100, 500 kids in a club. And thankfully, and then we finished, and they said nice show. We thought, okay, well, did we get a deal or not? And apparently, John King, who was our again my brother-in-law and our manager, called about 2 or 3 days later and said, "You have a record deal." Which is, in those days, from a group in Portsmouth, England, was like unheard of. So
it was one single record deal, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Most bands in those days, in the mid to late '60s, had a one single deal, and and you had 3 hours in the in Abbey Road to do it. Get it over with, get it out, and 2 weeks later it was out, and if it 3 weeks later, if it was a stiff, either being dropped or you did another one. But thankfully, the first single which we were called in to do, "I See the Light," which is a cover of a song, and one of our favorite songs on stage, it kind of like it grazed the top 40, and so we were asked to do another single. Stop me if I'm, rattling on too long. And that song was called "Reservations." But again, it did okay. It wasn't a flop, but it wasn't a hit.
You had some great tours, by the way, around that time. I mean, obviously,
that's correct. Yeah.
You go out and you're promoting and you'll put on these package tours. But I was trying to find some of the live gigs that you did. And the first one I could find was you performing with the Beach Boys, who were headlining, and Helen Shapiro.
But Walking Back to Happiness.
Wow. But the Beach Boys, I mean, were you a bit in awe when you got to the venue and see these guys who are huge?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because I think that was the point when we did that tour with the Beach Boys. We were turning pro. I mean, we were able to pay our way, and I think we were either bottom of the bill or second to bottom of the bill. I'm not sure, but they headlined the bill, but they were incredibly nasty. They were really, really nasty people, and also, to be perfectly honest, not very good. I mean, they couldn't play really well. It was a complete surprise because I loved Pet Sounds, and we loved that album, but they were really not pleasant people, and usually you get along. Yeah, most bands get along backstage. I mean, for the most part, but they were. And thankfully, it wasn't just us. It was everyone on the bill. They just dismissed everyone, and then they also, I think that they were doing something, rather, less than savory backstage as well. Whatever that was, some chemicals that we didn't even know about by then. But
how did you get along with the guys in the Quo? Because you toured a lot with Status Quo back then when they were going through the Flower Power and Pop period before they transitioned. How did you get on with the boys from Quo?
They were great. They were always great fun. We had a lot of fun with those guys. They were probably a little more naive than we were. Actually, we were naive. I think their dad or France's dad was the manager at that point. But no, they were fantastic, and they were great guys. And that tour that was a Gene Pitney tour, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. And those days it was a lot of fun doing those shows.
So things were changing musically. The whole music scene was beginning to move away from the pop sounds. Reggie Dwight, who of course you knew well and had the stint as the keyboard player, introduced you to the California band Spirit.
Yeah, he did. And I'll be forever grateful. Reg was our dep keyboard player, Elton, of course, and we became, me and my brother Ray, who has passed away unfortunately. We became friends even after he decided to go on his own and call himself Elton John. But yes, he said, you guys are really good, and you should really listen to the West Coast sound, especially Spirit and Love. Yeah, but
Yes.
Spirit, he said, that's a band that really have something very unusual. And I found out afterwards, in more recent times, that a lot of other groups in England had done the same thing, and including the biggest, Zeppelin, et cetera, we go through it. And they were the riff leaders of the world, and a lot of people stole riffs from them, including us, by the way.
Reg played you a couple of songs he'd written. When he said that you were leaving to do this new band, he played you your song and Skyline Pigeon. But the bit that I like best about that story is when he told you, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to be Elton John. And your response was, well, that isn't going to work, is it? I mean, let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely. Elton John, what kind of name is that? I mean, that's not Billy Fury. I mean, come on, that will never work. Of course, a year or two later, he was headlining arenas, and we were scratching to get gigs. So what can I say? He was right.
Jerry Brom got hold of you, and he, of course, went on to significant success with multiple acts, Bronze Records, of course. He was your manager. And there was structure beginning to appear because you're then all on weekly wages. You have a crew being put together. It was Colin Richardson who worked with Jerry who came up with the name. Now, who was it that said, I didn't like it, I thought it sounded like Sweet Corn Salesman? Was that you, or was that...
No, that was my brother Phil. Actually, I mean, Phil's got the big mouth. I've got the mouth behind the scenes. Yes, but Jerry was incredibly supportive, and did something that I think I don't think any managers would do today. Was literally support the band financially to this is Gentle Giant, to become Gentle Giant out of Simon Dupree. We had 6 months of writing, recording, just writing and putting everything together, getting the right players. But he was very, very supportive of our ability musically and, personally to put that together. And
how did you feel about the name Gentle Giant?
Well, he paid for it, so we just said we'll go along with
it. There was no template at the start then. Prog didn't exist. You were big fans of Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention.
Yeah.
And so if anybody, I suppose, had an input into molding some of your style, it was Zappa and the Mothers.
Yeah, Zappa was very big influence. But, our influences as a band, I think, came from the members of the band and their backgrounds. Yes. As you said before, I mean, I used to listen to Radio Luxembourg, and I loved soul and R&B music. We had members of the band, Kerry Minier, who came from the Royal Academy of Music with a degree in composition and percussion. My brother Ray was classically trained as a violinist. Gary Green was a real blueser. I mean, he was, his brother was Soft Machine's roadie, so he came from a different. So our styles of music all kind of like became all kind of merged into this sound, and our sound became Gentle Giant. It's. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Tony Visconti had done 4 albums with Tyrannosaurus Rex and just released The Man Who Sold the World with David Bowie. So he produced your debut album. He wasn't the huge star producer that he became a couple of years later. But what was it like working with him as he was developing his craft as well?
Tony was he was fantastic. Tony was basically a member of the band. I mean, he introduced us to recording in a real sense because until then we just done singles, and
Yeah.
to do an album was a whole different animal. And Tony also is a great musician, not was, still is. And in fact, while we were there, at I think the first album was called Trident. He was also producing T-Rex and Bowie. He was taking turns, and we became friendly with all these people he was working with. But Tony was incredibly supportive, and also very a fantastic mentor. In that he
Go on.
let us. No, in fact, he played certain things on the first album, which is fantastic.
There was another David Bowie link because that debut album cover was designed by Bowie's school friend, George Underwood.
Yes, indeed. He introduced us to this guy, George Underwood, who was hanging out with Bowie, and he said, well, I'll try it. And I said, go ahead. And he came up with this painting of this giant with us, and it looked great. So we said, okay, again, we're not paying for it, so no problem. Actually, we were very happy with it. It's great. I mean, we were very lucky in that we had a team of people in those days who were all creative and trying to do different things. So, again, the coming together of everyone was we were very lucky. What can I say?
The track "Funny Ways" is testimony to the quality of the catalogue and who you were and what you became. That you have people with diverse talents, such as this hip hop duo called Mad Villainy, who went back to sample Funny Ways. How did you feel when you had this hip hop duo just going back, 55 years to a track on your debut album to sample?
I think it's fantastic. I love it because, to be honest with you, I think some of the more clever music these days, if you want to say progressive music, okay, comes from the hip hop world, rather than any other world. I mean, the pop music and rock music world kind of has been stagnant as far as I'm concerned for the last 30 years. But some of the most interesting music, even whatever you think about it, is interesting because they do little twists and turns out of things that you would never expect. So I love the fact that Mad Villain and Travis Scott and Run the Jewels, had sampled Gentle Giant, and apparently Gentle Giant is a big influence, if you like, in the hip hop world, which I'm really happy about that. When I met a guy called Questlove, I don't know if you know who he is. He's Amir Thompson. He's the band leader in the Jimmy Fallon show. But anyway, the bottom line is he's very important in that world. And he said, you guys, I'm not sure if I should say this. Anyway, it's a word which I shouldn't mention on air. But anyway, we've been taken in by the hip hop community, and we're part of it, which is strange coming from white guys from Portsmouth, if you like, a little different.
Acquiring the taste. When you look back now, does it make you smile when you read those sleeve notes beginning with "It's our goal to expand the frontiers of contemporary popular music at the risk of becoming very unpopular"? I get that because, when I was growing up at school, it was almost like heresy. If you liked anything commercial, it had to be completely obscure. So I get that. But does it make you smile now when you read it?
Well, I'm going to just say this. It wasn't me that wrote it. It was my brother, Phil. And when I read it, it makes me smile, but it also makes me cringe a little bit, to tell you the truth. So there's a bit of pretension in there, but to hell with it. Why not?
Visconti was back doing less on the second album. But what was interesting to see was you had a young guy called Martin Russian Engineering. Now, he went on to have massive success with Human League, the Buzzcocks and the Stranglers. So was there anything stand out that you saw immediately about him, engineering?
Martin's, again, we've been very, very lucky in that we've had people behind the scenes and behind the boards, if you like, that were all part of what was Gentle Giant. And Martin brought in a levity, if you like, to the sessions when we sort of started getting, oh God, we can't do this anymore. He'd bring in jokes and he was, and also he was incredibly talented. He was also very musical. And at one point, I think during Octopus, I believe, when he was engineering that, he put up about 8 reels around the studio, reel of tape, and he'd have this tape rolling from a studio, 2-track studio, and on that tape was the Trogs. I don't know if you know the Trogs tape.
Yes,
you've heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that would be running all day long, all around the studio, around and when we were like at a loss about what we're going to do with it, damn it, what are we going to make it more, should we put some keyboards on? He said, hold on a second, and he'd push up that fader. And then you hear Reg Presley saying, it's a fucking number one. And it would break the tension incredibly. And we crack up and then go to the pub and come back. And that was Martin. That was a typical Martin move.
As we're celebrating the release of the live album, we should talk about your approach to touring and the show. A quote of yours at the time, our albums were more like sketches for the live shows, which were the paintings. Beautifully put.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, they were, because our live shows were very different to our music, our recorded music. So we could stretch out the pieces, which certainly were on vinyl at that time. But we'd also do things that would surprise an audience and also entertain the audience. That's one thing we love to do, is have fun and enjoy ourselves on stage, and have the fans, if you like, have their smile on their faces rather than staring down and think they're at the Royal Philharmonic or whatever. So we do things to have fun for ourselves and surprise again, shock sometimes the audience. I wish we were able to have the technology back then that they have today. Because I think we would even have a lot more fun. But we love being on stage and being able to move around and play each other's instruments when somebody else was able to do something else. So yeah, it was fun.
It must be like creating 2 completely different entities, because you've also said that we didn't used to jam a lot in the studio. You'd never just sit there and play for hours on end. So there must have been quite a lot of work going to preparation and rehearsal then, because you couldn't just go from playing, I don't know, a 6 or 7 minute piece to going on stage and extending that to a 16-minute piece.
Yeah, no, we rehearsed a great deal. I mean, one thing we were very hard workers. The time off was probably almost non-existent. We literally finish a tour, have a weekend off if we were lucky, and then start writing and then rehearse and record, and I mean, we were dedicated. We were dedicated to our music, to our careers and our livelihood as musicians. And so we never, like, jamming was that's nothing that we ever did. I mean, we came in to rehearsals with, I mean, Kerry and Ray were for the most part came in with the music. I'd come in occasionally with a little piece of music, and then 3 of us would get together put the lyrics together, and then the band would come in, and then we'd work out whatever we needed to record the album. There was those sitting around the studio all day playing E, A, and B, and saying, well, that's, let's grab that. No, that was never the case. In fact, not a lot of it, occasionally some of the music was scored by Kerry, and Ray perhaps, from time to time.
The tour. I mean, you're over to the US. I mean, some people took years to get over there to do anything, but you're over there. I mean, it's been well told, the story about the highs and lows of touring with Black Sabbath and that infamous night at the Hollywood Bowl. But did you actually have a relationship with them? Were they, did you get on with the guys?
We love those guys. I mean, we had the same management. They were huge gangsters. I mean, they were the mafia. But we love those guys. I mean, we still do. I mean, they were introduced to, again, unfortunately, in America. Their Chemical Romance was a very very strong
one.
Yeah. So that tour we did, was less than perfect, because we do a show and then we're supposed to be in another place the next day, and we couldn't because they were not able to make that show. So we do one show and be stuck in somewhere in the middle of Midwest for 2 days while they were able to get their minds around getting to another place.
That apart, though, you had many memorable nights and tours with some of the absolute greats, the legends: Frank Zappa, Wishbone Ash, Humble Pie, Edgar Winter, Foghat, Coliseum, ELO, Yes, Frampton and Tull. I mean, it's an incredible roster of rock and prog royalty. Have you got any specific memories of great moments that stand out?
Yeah, well, the one, if you're talking about if you're talking about other bands, I think that Jethro Tull effectively were very important for Gentle Giant, because Ian and the band, when we were just starting to break through in certain places, they said, "Come on a tour in Europe with us," and we really broke Europe with them. And then we were in America with Tull, and with Sabbath. And after the Sabbath tour, we did a few dates with other bands, and Tull were coming over, and Tull said, come on and be our support band in the US. So, they were very important in helping Gentle Giant become, putting ourselves in front of people for quite a long period of time, as far as bands are concerned, being influential. But I do remember, I think it was a Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. It was a 7,000 or 8,000 seater. We sold that out, I think, in 74, 75. And that show always comes to mind because we were playing at our peak. I mean, we were damn good, and we finished our set. We went on for an encore. We finished the encore, and the crowd just wouldn't go. So, oh Christ! So we thought, okay, what are we going to do? So we did one more encore, and the crowd wouldn't go. I mean, and the lights were up, and no one would leave. And literally, no one would leave. And we literally didn't know anything else. We didn't have any more songs rehearsed, but we had to go out because no one was leaving. And actually, I think John or Gaz said, okay, you know what? Let's play it in the midnight hour. But Otis Redding. So that's what we did. we jammed. We didn't jam it because that's something we do in rehearsal. And that's what we did as the encore. And I think after that, they said, okay, I think the audience realized it was finished. We couldn't do any more.
I mean, you released Three Friends, the album, which was the first one in the States. The success and the acclaim was growing. You're on these tours. You're putting out an album every year. Octopus gave you the biggest success. How were you coping personally? Because it was relentless. I mean, it was tour, new album, rehearsal, tour. I mean, drugs and alcohol consumed many bands, many musicians in those days. How did you guys manage to keep it at bay and keep yourself in a sort of fairly harmonious environment?
That's a good question. I don't know. I do know. I mean, I have never. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. I have never had a drug in my life. I've never. I I never drunk. I've never been drunk. I've never touched any. If I was a glass of wine, I mean, I'm just that. Let's not make myself a virginal kind of a character here. But no, we were. Gary and John after a gig would have a beer or two. But honestly, I think our music and our lifestyle but yeah, our music was the most important to us. That and we knew that if you imbibed in something, we would not be as good or as good as we could be. And so yes, it was always around us. But honestly, I don't think we were one of the very few bands that wouldn't go hang out and get plastered or put lines of blow in front of us and do it. But yeah, we saw plenty of it around us. But we were very lucky having the same kind of mentality individually and together, that music was the most important thing, and presenting that was something that was that would stop us um, being able to present it properly.
As we get to playing the Fool and the new album release and the reworkings in '75. There was the bootleg recorded at the Academy of Music, was one of the venues, called Playing the Fool, spelt with an E on the end of fool for some bizarre reason. But it was an interesting take that you had on the bootleggers themselves in comparison to, say, what Peter Grant would do to a bootlegger. Your view was very different. It was like, well, we take it almost as a badge of honor. We've been recognized. We have arrived.
Yeah, yeah. Who would who wants to buy a bootleg of Gentle Giant? For God's sake, that's God. You could buy a record, but a bootleg. So I think that was a realization, if you like, that we were getting pretty popular. It was obviously we knew we were starting to get there, but that having someone bootleg, and have the wherewithal to make it a disc was certainly we were happy about that. So that's why we stole the name, of the live album. What a great idea. We'll take the E off and call Playing the Fool. Brilliant. So that was you're exactly correct.
It was the era of the mega double album, the live album, The Who, The Stones, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Peter Frampton. You name it. Everybody had done an incredible job of producing great double albums made in Japan, maybe what many people think is one of the best ever. What makes a good live album for you? And has your view changed over the last 50 years? The view that you had then as opposed to the view that you have now?
I'll tell you what makes the great live albums, especially in those days. And it's pretty simple. The bands could play. We could play our instruments. There was no hard drives. There was no computers. There was no, anything, or audio tunes or anything like that. We could play. Yes, and Peter Frampton and all the rest of the bands you mentioned, we could play our instruments. We were damn good. So that's the reason why there was a lot of really good live albums that came out during that period of time. All these bands could play their instruments really well. Today, it would be very tough for some of these bands to do it. Well, they would. No, it wouldn't be, because then you just throw on the computer and just have it play away on its own.
The new package, the complete experience, which it is. It's an incredible sound. We have new tracks, we have stereo versions, we have 5.1, we have Dolby Atmos. The beauty of today with technology on offer is that we can revisit and improve what's gone before. They've done a remarkable version with this.
Yeah, they really have. I think that Dan Bordemark, who is our archivist, actually, he said, I think there's a great idea. And we thought about it, and he said, it would be a great idea for, I'm a fan, he said. So I think the fans would love to hear your playing the Fool, but in a complete version, like the whole stage, that from beginning to end, the concert, not just selections, excuse me, not just selections from the concert, but the whole concert. And I said, okay, well, we had the multis, and he was able to put together the whole concert, including the tracks that we didn't put on in the first editions, if you like, and including, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat or something. Including Ray's, I mean, he did it during the set, a brilliant violin solo where we have 4 speakers around the hall or the venue. And he'd play with the audience and have the audience laugh with him. But you'll hear that on the album. You'll hear the tape spin. We had to change reels. So I said, hold on a minute. You'll hear the breakdown of the of what happened when Ray and Gaz and John played Sweet Georgia Brown.
And this is what makes it. This really is what makes it. One of my absolute pet hates with a live album is that they are just live versions of an album track. I want to actually hear the intros. I want to hear the banter in between songs. I want to hear the songs in order they came in on show nights. And that's all being put back together in here. So it is a snapshot of the moment. Hearing somebody cough in the front row or cheer or shout out a few words. Hearing you speak some very good pidgin French, I must say. It's amazing.
Franglish.
But that's what makes it. That really is what makes it, I think.
Yeah, exactly that. And I wasn't sure whether it would, but it does. And you could hear the band on stage. I mean, John's very vocal. He's got John, drummer. And, he's, when he started to do the end break, he screams out loud, and you could hear that on the tape, which I think is wonderful. I think it's, it is a snapshot. You're absolutely correct of the stage show itself, which, I'm happy about.
The live album was a defining moment back in the 70s, if you just go back there. But these things were fraught with issues, weren't they? As you found out when you took Tull's mobile recording unit around Europe. I mean, it wasn't just a case like today, turn up and press a button. I mean, these were complex engineering scenarios that had to be 100% right, or they didn't work at all.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you were restricted by the tape, itself. I mean, you only had an hour, and you had, and so we literally would stop, and say, "Excuse me a sec," because we have to change the tape in the truck outside, So these things were real. It wasn't. Again, this is the analog period of doing things, which I miss a great deal actually, even though. Today you could do anything with anything. But yeah, there were things that, literally those things that you had to deal with that you don't have today. So what can I say?
This package that's been put together is made for 5.1 and Dolby Atmos. I mean, I was playing it earlier, and there's sounds coming from everywhere. If you haven't got that and you hear it in somebody else's place, it's almost going to make you want to get out and start spending money to upgrade your hi-fi equipment, because it is a different experience.
Oh, absolutely.
To it in Dolby Atmos. I mean, it's quite incredible.
Yeah, no, it is. It's beautifully put together, and you can hear the clarity of the instruments around you, and other stakes as well, as well as the good stuff.
But that's the beauty, Nothing is ever perfect. What is it they say? You can't ever get perfection, but if you chase perfection, you'll catch excellence.
Yeah, that's exactly a great phrase, actually. Yeah, no, and I think that's what Gentle Giant was about. That's I'm going to steal that phrase.
It's not mine.
Okay. Whatever it is, I'm going to steal it anyway.
I've got an idea. It might have been Vince Lombardi, actually.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay.
But then, as you said, what followed that, you could feel the time of erosion coming in and saying that the last 2 or 3 albums maybe shouldn't have been done. But I listened back to some of them, and there's some great stuff on there. And if you look at other bands of the time, like Jefferson Starship morphing into Starship as they did, moving from prog to a more generic rock sound, it wasn't unusual. And those maybe have been dismissed a bit and perhaps need a little bit more discovery.
Well, I don't say that they shouldn't have been done. I mean, I think we were trying to do different things. If they worked, they did. If they worked. If they didn't, okay, then we'll take another path. But if you don't do something different, if you try and rehash the same thing you did yesterday, today, then you'll never move forward. So, whether they were successful or not, I mean, there were. I think Giant for a Day was an album that we went too far into trying to be quite commercial. Okay, it was a mistake. No, not really, because it was a good. We tried, and if it was the wrong direction, okay, but you learn from that and do something else. But at that time, radio and other places where you'd be heard, and and your fan base were starting to listen to hit singles, and the one thing Gentle Giant could never do or never be is a hit single band, and I knew that from having been in Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, and having a very big hit single, if you like, a couple of minutes, and that was something that, thank God, we never had, honestly, because it tends to become a millstone around your neck.
Not many people manage to take a very successful music career as an artist and then translate that into being a very successful music industry executive, running record companies, etc., etc. 6 years at Polygram, who were, they were the big players. I mean, you had Rush, you had Rainbow, you had the Scorpions, you had Def Leppard. Did this excite you as much as being on stage, working behind the scenes? Or did it take growing into?
It certainly took. It certainly took growing into. I remember the very first day when I joined Polygram and went from office to office, and I called my wife and said, "I'm going to leave tomorrow." I mean, I realized that the music business wasn't the music business; it was a business of music. And it's at that point, I realized that some of the people who worked at the place where you were supposed to be championed were doing it for a different reason. But I learned, and to tell you the truth, I was able to put bread on the table for my family. And I learned how to recognize, good talent and nurture it. And that's something I think I brought from being a musician and touring in every fashion, including not, sleeping in the van, to living in the best hotels. No musician who I signed could say, "Well, you don't know what it's like," because I certainly did know what it was like. So in that respect, I could also play as well. So I co-wrote some of the songs that you probably don't know about, and I rather not be, I don't want my name on somebody else's album. But so I was happy about being able to help artists become as successful as they could be. But if you're asking me across the board, was it the same feeling? Well, now I reflect back. No, it wasn't. To be a musician and create is the best thing you could ever do.
You had a simple mantra, didn't you, for signing artists or bands or whatever, which was, the most important artists are all leaders. They are unique. They lead in their whatever sector they are in. They are not followers.
Correct.
And that's what you felt when you your first signing of major significance, John Bon Jovi, as he was at the time before it became Bon Jovi, when you heard Runaway.
Yeah, John, I mean, he literally, he had put his band together, and it was on the radio in New York. The track that he wrote with actually Tony Bon Jovi, his second cousin. And when I met him, he looked at me and he said, "I'm going to be bigger than Elvis." And I looked. You see, is this? Am I being punked, or is this real? And I looked at him right in the face, but he meant it. It wasn't just. I think I'm going to be bigger than Elvis, or I want to be. I do. I hope I'm bigger than Elvis. I'm going to be bigger than Elvis, and you can't catch that. I mean, you have to. If you believe in that in yourself, then you know that someone's going to drive that won't quit, and you have to support that. And I did for quite a few years until until 1977.
There were loads. It was a fabulously exciting time. I mean, it really was for people that were growing up. For me, that was growing up listening to it. Cinderella, a great band. Tom Kiefer, what a great voice. One that did stand out. What did you think when you heard Kingdom Come for the first time? Because I remember hearing it on the radio and everybody was saying, Led Zeppelin got back together. But what did you think when you heard them?
I thought Lenny and the band were great and sounded just like Led Zeppelin. So that's why, and Led Zeppelin was on the radio. I went, look, I mean, I got to be pragmatic too. I mean, they made a couple of great records, and I put Bob Rock in the studio. And Bob was only an engineer, and that was his first production, effectively, with the band. And the band were a really good band. I mean, that first album was a great album.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the personalities in the band, didn't gel ultimately, eventually, when I'd left the company by the time they started, at each other, and didn't become what they should have become.
Yeah.
But certainly the first couple of albums the first album especially just flew into the charts.
And the trading of artists, you were at ATCO back end of the 80s, you signed Pantera, and there's maybe people don't know about that, but I mean, again, what foresight. And you've got Dream Theater, who have just performed at Radio City Music Hall on their 40th anniversary there. Yep. But is it true that at the time that Atlantic were about to drop AC/DC, and you took them on, and Stevie Nicks went in the other direction?
That's so absolutely correct.
It was a swap, AC/DC for Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, I think I did pretty well out of that swap.
Well, I mean, it was the comeback of comebacks, isn't it? Because the two previous albums they'd done, AC/DC, I think, Flick of the Switch, Fly on the Wall, Even Who Made Who, were not great.
No.
But Thunderstruck.
There was yeah. So I was the managers. They were going to be. They had a big deal. I mean, they had a very big deal at Atlantic, it was too much for the guys who ran it for Atlantic, and they said, we're not sure if we want to do this anymore. But how about if you guys me and take it on, and we'll do a trade. And I said, absolutely. So I traded and had my business affairs redo their deal. And I said, okay, to Angus and Malcolm. And they, and the good thing about me being involved with AC/DC was that I knew, and they're renowned to be very hard to work with. I mean, they're very insular. But the great thing that I had was that I knew their older brother, George, who was in the Easy Beats from back in the old days.
Yes.
So I could speak to them about George, and George said, oh, yeah, I remember Simon Dupree. Go with them. And so I was able to even go into the studio with those guys they would never allow anyone in the studio with them. So I said, come up to Vancouver with Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock. and The Razor's Edge was made, and
The rest
out
is
came
history.
Thunderstruck, and they were back. Yeah.
What's given you the most satisfaction in your life? And we're not allowed to say when I had my children.
Well, that's
in your,
okay.
because that goes without saying. So when you look back at each era of your time spent in the music industry, from when you were getting going at the beginning and Simon Dupree, and then the start with Gentle Giant, and then working in the industry itself and signing and finding all these incredible bands who have gone on to sell millions and become some of the greatest bands ever. There's a lot to choose. What would you be drawn to?
It's a very simple question. Sitting down with a guitar and coming up with an idea and bring it to my brother and say, what do you think? And he said, yeah, it's pretty good. Let's work out something that the rest of the guys will like. And we bring it to them and we work out something that turned out to be something that nobody saw in the future and nobody knew from before. Just the creation of music. Very simple. That's the most important thing that comes to my mind.
And of course, having the blue plaque, because you're alongside Charles Dickens and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote his first two Sherlock Holmes stories whilst in Portsmouth. I mean, being alongside Charles Dickens in the Pompey or the Portsmouth Hall of Fame, I mean, that must have given you a lot of pride and personal pride to know that this amount of time later in life, people still remember and thought that it deserved the recognition.
Well, that's what amazes me, actually, is that we're talking about something that we recorded, if you like, and or created 50 years ago. When we were doing it, the idea that the thought that we'd even be around, forget talking about the music, was an anathema. But it was the fact that I was born in Glasgow. In the tenements. We're talking about one bathroom for 5 families. So it was a different era, and the fact that I'm happy that the music, my career as a musician and then executive went well, and I was able to provide for my family and my kids and everything else. But I don't want to say proud because it'll sound trite, but I'm proud that we made a little impact on the world.
And lastly, the last thing, I have about 3 million quid here, but what we want in exchange is for you to play 2 nights at the O2. Are you interested?
we've been honestly, truthfully, we've been asked over the years. It's just bizarre, but. No, that chapter was closed. It was closed in 1980.
Has there never been a party at any time just thought, oh, should we? Let's just do it once more.
Not with me and my brother Ray, who's passed away, of course.
Yeah.
No, we moved on, and when you try to recreate something that was. Yeah. Then it becomes a parody, and that's something that I would never want for me or for anyone else to parody yourself when you were younger. I mean, I'm an old guy now. I look in the mirror and say, "Who the hell's that?"